Only those who go where few have gone can see what few have seen. Buddha. Every man is the creature of the age in which he lives. Very few are able to raise themselves above the ideas of the time. Voltaire. Edgar Cayce once said, destiny or karma depends upon what the soul has done about what it's become aware of. Men occasionally stumble upon the truth, but most pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing had ever happened. Winston Churchill. Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect, or it's time to reform. Mark Twain. I'm not the weird one here. I'm in the majority. Paul Rudd said that to Jennifer Aniston in Wanderlust. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. There are two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way, not getting started. Buddha. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he is not the same man. Heraclitus. It is the mark of an intelligent mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Aristotle. The ancient Sumerians, the creators of the first civilization, told a myth about its origins. It was, they said, a devil's bargain. It offered the noblest ideals of humanity, but also brought violence, greed, and destruction. All of this is civilization, the Sumerian god of wisdom told humanity. And if you wish its benefits, you have to take all of its qualities. And once accepted, you cannot give them back, and it's up to you to use with restraint and with wisdom. To the ignorant, even the words of the wise seem foolish. Isaiah. Wise men learn more from fools than fools from wise men. Marcus Aurelius Cato. Everybody is ignorant, only on different subjects. Will Rogers. Empty your cup. Sit down before fact like a little child and be prepared to give up every preconceived notion. Follow humbly to whatever abyss of nature leads you, or you shall learn nothing, as T.H. Huxley would say. Everyone receives two kinds of education, the one given him by someone else, and the other far more important, which he gives himself. Hello, my name is John Rose, and I'm quoting the author or the translator of the Essene Gospel of Peace. Education is a weapon whose effects depend on who holds it in his hands and at whom it is aimed. Joseph Stalin, in an interview with H.G. Wells back in 1934. Believe only your own experience. There is no fact like a fact learned from your own life. Aristotle. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Chinese proverb. As equality spreads and men individually become less strong, they ever increasingly let themselves glide with the stream of the crowd and find it hard to maintain alone an opinion abandoned by the rest. Alexis De Tocqueville. Every man is a creature of the age in which he lives. Very few are able to rise above the ideas of the time. Voltaire. You absorb what's useful, you reject what's useless, and you add what's your own. Bruce Lee. It is the mark of an intelligent mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Aristotle. However, there are some ideas that are hard to entertain. As Margaret Mead would say, it's easier to change a man's religion than it is their diet. Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world, for in fact it is the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. This is a very well-known poem known as the Serenity Prayer that they use at Alcoholics Anonymous. Now they took that poem, modified it slightly, but the original poem actually comes from the works of Epictetus. He knew there are three types of problems, and he also knew that false knowledge was the number one reason why we can't find the knowledge we need, because we cannot learn anything when we think we already know. Only the wisest and stupidest men never change. Confucius. It is the most unhappy people who most fear change. McLaughlin. He who has a strong enough why can bear any how. Nietzsche. Correction is always distasteful to the truant child, said Thoreau. Consequences are never to be desired, although always inevitable, when we are the subjects of misdeeds. It is the ungrateful task of hygienists to point out to men and women what are those misdeeds. Herbert Shelton. Choose what is best. Habit will soon render it agreeable and easy. Pythagoras, an immortal mathematical genius. A vegetarian, a raw food advocate, a founder of a whole philosophy. The only good is knowledge, the only evil is ignorance. Bad men live to eat and drink, whereas good men eat and drink to live. Socrates. The time will come when men such as I will look upon the murder of animals as they now look upon the murder of men. Leonardo da Vinci. For as long as man continues to be the ruthless destroyer of lower living beings, he will never know health and peace. For as long as men massacre animals, they will kill each other. Indeed, he who sows the seeds of murder and pain cannot reap joy and love. Pythagoras. While we ourselves are the living graves of murdered beasts, how can we expect any ideal conditions on this earth? The person who believes, or the person who is ignorant enough to believe that his nourishment depends on meat, is in a horrible dilemma. George Bernard Shaw. Within a 70-year period of time, the average American eats 11 cows, 1 calf, 3 lambs and sheep, 23 hogs, 45 turkeys, 1,097 chickens, and 861 pounds of fish. Now, that was Gary Knoll in his Vegetarian Handbook, copyrighted 1987, so 30 years ago, in his 70-year lifespan, the average 70-year-old American was eating over 2,000 animals, 2,041 if we count every meal that you ate fish was a pound, and therefore you ate 861 fish. I believe that every man who has ever been earnest to preserve his higher or poetic faculties in the best condition has been particularly inclined to abstain from animal food. Henry David Thoreau. One should eat to live, not live to eat. My refusing to eat flesh occasioned an inconvenience, and I was frequently chided for my singularity, but with this lighter repast I made the greater progress, from greater clearness of head and quicker comprehension. Benjamin Franklin. And that's where Plato said that the gods created certain kinds of beings to replenish our bodies. They are the trees, the plants, and the seeds. Obviously, Plato knows that we were not designed to eat animal products. We follow that quote up by Plato saying that, and we have made of ourselves living cesspools and driven doctors to invent names for our diseases. So it's obvious if we're eating animals, we're going to have this cesspool inside of us. In fact, I'm sure that's what George Bernard Shaw meant when he said, while we ourselves are the living graveyards of murdered beasts, how can we expect any ideal conditions on this planet? While we ourselves are the living graves of murdered beasts. So this is what Plato was saying. As we have made of ourselves living cesspools, living graves of murdered beasts. So that's what we're doing. This is what Victor Hugo meant when he said we have this serpent inside of us. So we know for sure Plato can be at least referring to the eating of animals as a mistake, because we know animals take about 3 days to go through our food tube, which is why the average person in America has maybe 12, 15 meals backed up in their intestines. And that's like a serpent that pollutes our body. But really, does that really say that we shouldn't cook our food? Well, let's take a look at my favorite of all quotes by Plato, and many of you all know what I'm going to say. Right? Whatever deceives men seems to produce a magical enchantment. It is the mark of an intelligent mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Aristotle. However, there are some ideas that are hard to entertain. As Margaret Mead would say, it's easier to change a man's religion than it is their diet. Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world, for in fact it is the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead. I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I do know, the only ones among you who will be happy are those who have sought and have found how to serve. Albert Schweitzer. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. Henry David Thoreau. Against every great and noble endeavor are 1,000 mediocre minds. Albert Einstein. There are thousands hacking at the branches of evil for one who is striking at the root. Henry David Thoreau. The biggest cause of trouble in the world today is that the stupid people are so sure about things and the intelligent folks are so full of doubts. So it reminds you of what I said the other day when I quoted Lao Tzu. High capacity, middling capacity, and low capacity. Put it into practice. Have two minds about it. Laugh out loud. So, where does doubt fit into this? Nothing wrong with questioning things. In fact, the only way you're going to learn everything is to question everything. But how do you know whether or not you're really questioning everything? I can doubt everything except one thing. And that has to do with the very fact that I doubt. Descartes. Didn't he say, I think, therefore I am? I wonder if he said that afterwards and if he'd rephrase that and go, I think, therefore I am, I think, therefore I am, I think. Seriously, folks. Goes back to what Moses said in the teachings from the Essenes to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Moses said, I have two main obstacles. There are the ignorant masses and the arrogant rulers. Reminds me of what Shelton said. The greatest obstacle to living reform is not just ignorance, which is what we got a lot of, but it's the people who control everything. The ones who rule the world. The elitist. That small group that control everything, so that we lack the ability to question things. The problem that most of us have, I'm afraid, is that most of us are doing things we think are okay, and they're not okay. And what's the problem with that? You look around and everyone's doing it. So you don't even think you got to question it, do you? And of course, there's so much conflicting information. A lot of problems, the average person has got to be honest and say, I don't know. But most of them don't do that, do they? No. As Bertrand Russell pointed out just a moment ago with the beginning of my video here, the stupid people are so sure about things. They don't think they don't know. Society is always taken by surprise by any new example of common sense. Ralph Waldo Emerson. If the ideal cannot be achieved on every level, it's still worth describing as a standard to aim at. That's one of my favorite philosophers, Socrates. Fasting cures disease, dries up bodily humors, puts demons to flight, gets rid of impure thoughts, makes the mind clear, the heart pure, and the body sanctified, and raises man to the throne of God. Athenius. I fast for greater physical and mental efficiency. Plato. The more you feed a sick man, the more you harm him. Hippocrates. It is a crime to feed anything to the sick. No food should be given until all symptoms are gone. The life of the patient depends upon getting rid of the putrid food still remaining in the bowels before enough putrents is absorbed to cause death. Dr. John Tilden. A full belly is the mother of all evil. The best of all medicines are rest and fasting. Benjamin Franklin. Choose what is best. Habit will soon render it agreeable and easy. Pythagoras. Let us train our minds to desire what the situation demands. Seneca. Strange the desire for certain pleasures is part of my pain. Now, what do you suppose Khalil Gibran was referring to when he said that? Unrequited love? Probably. Of course, that's not what I thought of when I first read that several decades ago. First thing I thought of is something that I always say, is that most of our long-term pain is coming from some of our short-term pleasures. And you know what we do with our pleasures, don't you, my friends? That's why we run to denial to protect those pleasures. We live in a fantasy land. We trick, we hide, we lie, we delude, we deceive, we cover up, we overcompensate, we rationalize, we intellectualize, we generalize, we minimize, we blame, we bargain, we harbor illusions, we pretend it's not our fault, and then what do? We go looking for excuses so we don't have to do this, don't we? We love to hear good news about our bad habits. And you're always going to find it, aren't you? Oh, look, I just read a study. Coffee's good for you. Oh, the wine is good for us. Indeed, my friends, we are in a major state of denial, individually and collectively. And remember, denial strikes twice. It keeps us from finding the knowledge we need. It keeps us from applying the knowledge we need. I count him braver who overcomes his desires than him who conquers his enemies. For the greatest victory is over self. The greatest victory is over self. Aristotle understood that we are the enemy individually, but we are also the ones we're waiting for. We are the heroes if we can overcome ourselves. That's the biggest problem. We are the biggest obstacle we have. Who is strong? He that can conquer his bad habits. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Benjamin Franklin. Never suffer an exception to occur until the new habit is securely rooted in your life. Each lapse is like the letting fall of a ball of string which one is carefully winding up. A single slip undoes more than a great many turns will wind again. William James. Keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behavior becomes your habits. Keep your habits positive because your habits become your values. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. Gandhi. No man causes more grief than one clinging blindly to the vices of his ancestors. William Faulkner. If history repeats itself and the unexpected always happens, how incapable must man be of learning from experience? George Bernard Shaw. The more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. Tacitus. The greater number of laws and enactments, the more thieves and robbers there will be. Lao-Tzu. A state is better governed which has but few laws, and those laws strictly observed. Descartes. Now when I think of those three quotes, I immediately think of the opposite of that. The more corruption, the more laws. The less corruption, the less laws. In an ideal world, we'd only have one law. And I've talked about this many times, and there's three ways I can illustrate this one law. One is to use the Essene Gospel of Peace. One law, thou shalt not kill. Don't kill man, nor beast, nor the food that goes into your mouth. For if you eat living food, the same will quicken you. But if you kill your food, the dead food will kill you also. For only life comes from life, and from death always death. That really makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? One law. Paradise. The second way we can explain the same law is one of my favorites. It's what I've used all the time. And I say we have to have a minimal biophoton level. Now that gives us a little more leeway. Might not have to be 100%. We don't know for sure what that minimal level is. And also this allows us to gradually increase that as we get more momentum. Once we reach a tipping point, I think it's going to be a no-brainer. No one's going to want to go back and do that anymore. Now the third way, I've told this story before also. Let's just say I'm God, and I want to make it real simple for my children. I'll tell them there's a simple story to stay in paradise, in Rose's garden, in Rose's paradise. And that is that there are two trees and one law. Two trees, one law. The two trees have to stay separate. The first tree is the trees of life. If we nurture the trees of life, we'll get all of our needs and it will nourish us. If we simply went around the planet and planted a forest everywhere, this planet would be paradise everywhere. One law, we got to nurture those trees, and we got to keep the other tree, this tree of knowledge, separate. The tree of knowledge are all the things that we master. And the thing about the things we master, it's like all new knowledge. It has the potential for creating evil if we apply it to things we need, which is how we live. And the opposite of live is evil, and that's what the word means. So, you got to keep the two trees separate. Simple. And remember, when you look at that tree of knowledge, I've identified 5 main things we've mastered that drastically change the fate of mankind. The very first thing is the fire. It goes back to the cooking of the food. So it's all one simple story. So it's time to get excited. It's time to do something that, as of now, very few of us have done. But when you go where few have gone, you will be able to see what few have seen. You'll be able to rise above the ideas of the time and understand what I say when I close every video. When you do this, you're in for a treat.